The son installed a camera in his mother's house and was almost speechless with what he saw. Alexander was on the phone with his mother, saying "yes ma'am" repeatedly without paying attention to her, as he was trying to edit and publish the work he had been doing for an hour and a half. Normally, this work would take a professional journalist about 10 minutes, even if he wasn't in a hurry. But Alexander was reading the same line for the fourth time, not understanding the points. Obviously, Alexander was not good at multitasking because at some point there was a silence on the phone, foreshadowing a hurricane. "Are you not listening to me again?" The woman on the other end of the line was suddenly very angry. "What do you mean?" "Yes, Alex, I'm telling you that someone was rude to me at the pharmacy and you say, 'Yes, Mom?' Really, Mom? Don't you understand that I'm at work? What about the queue at the pharmacy or post office or grocery store that you didn't like? It's the least of my worries," the young man replied. "How dare you talk to me that way?" The woman instantly copied her favorite phrase and her voice shook suspiciously. "You're saying I'm a burden to you, right?" "Mommy," Alex started in a soft tone, "please just try to understand that I have to work to pay the mortgage bills. Sometimes I don't even have time for lunch, which is so urgent that I couldn't wait until the end of the day. I may visit you tonight and we'll have tea and cake. Then you can tell me about your amazing stories, about the neighbors, about the exorbitant prices for bread and cheese, about the incompetent therapist in the hospital, about the spikes in blood pressure. Tell me about the weather or anything else you want to tell me." Alex immediately regretted what he'd said, even though he hadn't seen his mother's face. He could imagine her pursing her lips, resentful in response to his suggestion. "Of course, Alex, that would be nice," she grumbled after half a minute of silence. "Except you don't visit me. You forgot the way to my house. The place where you grew up and have taken your first steps. We got this apartment because your father served in the military and he and I were among the first people to move in." Alex almost groaned. "Mom, I'm sorry, but the manager is calling me into his office. Something urgent," he interrupted the woman. "I'll visit you this week, okay?" Without giving the woman a chance to scold him or call out her conscience, Alex hung up. The man looked anxiously at the duration of the call. 32 minutes, Alexander sighed heavily again. He leaned back in his office chair, rubbing his face and tired eyelids. "Alex, your mother called again?" His colleague Abigail immediately reacted to the heavy sighs by looking behind her monitor and giving the man a mocking look. "Alex, please, not like last time. Send your news to me. First, I will check before posting on the site. I am not kidding. Don't make the same mistakes again." His colleague offered to help. Alex gave her a pouty look, but he didn't refuse Abigail's offer. It definitely felt good to send her the news and let her look at it with fresh eyes. The fact is that Alexander worked as a journalist and editor at the online news portal. His duties included finding and writing relevant news and current affairs. He was also dedicated to writing economic opinion pieces, which he sincerely loved. But it's not easy to write the latest city news when you're constantly distracted by phone calls like that. Typos and unacceptable errors begin to creep into the journalist's text, which then turns into fines. Because of his mother's calls, the man made a big mistake. The text included the address and real name of the witness to the crime, which was considered distribution of personal data and could lead to criminal charges. Of course, the news was removed from the site immediately, but it managed to go viral on other internet resources. They even had to get the police involved, but luckily nothing happened. Alexander looked around the office with a somber gaze, but 5 employees worked in front of monitors beside him. The editorial office was small and studio-like. Journalists sat next to each other, most of the time wearing headphones so as not to disturb each other's work. Abigail overheard Alex's conversation with his mother. She was the one with whom the man maintained close, even friendly relations, and always as the pretty girl with the blue eyes. "Look, it's none of my business, but maybe you don't really pay attention to her," the girl asked when Alex sent her the news. "Elderly people are lonely and appreciate it when you call or text all the time," Abigail told Alex. "My mother feels some kind of catastrophic and unhealthy lack of attention. I think only a therapist could figure out what she feels. She calls me 5 times a day, morning and night. She constantly demands my presence in her life and lives a little way away. By the way, does she live out of town?" "Yes, with our traffic, it's a long drive out of town." "Where do you live now?" A colleague supported the conversation. "I got a mortgage to buy an apartment on the next street right next to the office. The only thing is, how can I pay the mortgage if I'm about to get sick?" the man shared, his throat feeling dry. Alex picked up a cup and got up to pour water into it along the way. The man didn't stop sharing his worries with Abigail. It's not like she was just calling. She always asks for sympathy. She says that she has no one to live with. She lost the sense of everything. She just sees it in me, the man said as he poured water. "She wants to have grandchildren, you can imagine. But where where to get them. Even during my last encounter with the girl I was compelled to interrupt the day, I left the girl alone and went to my mother outside the city. What do you think? And she called that night and didn't explain anything. I thought she had a flood or even a heart attack. There was only the lamp she needed the light for at 9:00 p.m. when she went to bed. The journalist took a few voracious sips, wiped his mouth with his hand, and turned sharply to his colleague. "Don't think I don't feature in her life," he declared. "I visit her once a week, after work, and once on holidays. This is if there are no force majeure situations. I always help out with that, her fridge with groceries, and we go to different events together whenever possible. I mean, that's not enough." Abigail shrugged, considering the question rhetorical. While working side by side with Alexander, she could see how often his mother called her son. In such an atmosphere, it was difficult to work and build a personal life. For example, Alex didn't notice her. Abigail tries so hard. She treats him with homemade sweets or helps with his work, and then it turns out that he goes on dates. "You are an only child, right?" Abigail clarified, disheartened. "Yes, my father passed away 5 years ago. She is elderly now. She gave birth to me in silence," Alex replied. "I don't even know what to advise you," the girl admitted slowly, wiggling her fingers on the keyboard. "Try talking to her. Explain the situation. By the way, tell her I send my regards." "Thanks," the man answered, everything at once. He knew perfectly well, however, that talking to his mother was pointless. She would just give him a critical look and launch into a long story about how she stayed up at night because of him when he was a baby, and now he couldn't find time for his own mother in his busy schedule. And the problem wasn't time. Alex could find the time. The problem was that Agnes, Alex's mother, wanted absolutely every minute of her son's life. Alex tried to distract himself from his thoughts by breaking into his work. Today, he had to skip lunch because he couldn't keep up with his daily plan of 25 news articles a day when there were only a few minutes left in the day and Abigail was about to finish her work. Alex's smartphone rang again. The man frowned at the screen, but the number was unfamiliar. "Hello?" He pressed the phone to his ear with his shoulder, quickly finishing the rest of his work. "Alex?" a worried voice said. It's his mother's neighbor, Gina. "Do you remember me, Gina, the neighbor on the 3rd floor?" And he remembered her well. After all, he had lived in that building for 20 years. She and his mother were close friends, visiting each other for tea and baking pies together. But why would she call him? He did not understand. "Yes, Gina, did something happen?" Gina speaks loudly. "Alex, I have to tell you, your mother was found lying on the floor today. She had a heart attack. She went to the store and it was a disaster. She landed right on my stairs. Fortunately, I got out in time and called for an ambulance. The doctors came, examined her, and gave her an injection. But now the problem is that Agnes is still very weak and bedridden. She can't get up at all. The doctor said to take care of her and help her. I will help however I can, but you also have to take care of your mother." The neighbor told him the news that shocked the man. He tried to understand the meaning of the woman's words, saying, "But we spoke on the phone this morning. Everything was fine." "This happened not long ago," Gina said. "I left her for 5 minutes. I stayed with her for a while after the doctors left to make sure she was okay." "But why didn't my mom call me?" he kept asking. "Well, I asked the same thing, but Agnes said you had a lot of work to do and had no free time. But she didn't want to distract you and she didn't want you to worry about her. But I couldn't resist calling you and telling you everything," Gina answered. There was some reproach in her tone. "You did the right thing. Thanks. I will be there soon." Certainly, the man was concerned about his mother's condition, but he also wondered how it was possible that his mother decided not to bother her son with a phone call. But then the man began to think that maybe she was offended that he'd interrupted their conversation this morning. So that's why she didn't call now. That's how it goes. First, you not have enough time for your loved ones, you get mad at them, and then go visit them in the hospital or even the cemetery. And then you say you're here. Realizing that his thoughts had turned rather dark and led the man in the wrong direction, Alex turned off his computer and left the office. He arrived at his mother's house. He went up to the 4th floor and opened the door with the key. He found his mother on the bed in her room. She was sleeping with the TV on and a glass of water and medicine on the bench next to the woman. When she noticed her guest, the woman woke up and the drowsiness disappeared from her face. "Alex, why are you here?" she guessed. "Gina called me and told me you weren't feeling well. What happened?" Her son sat up in the bed. The woman, in moderation, spoke about her health. It turns out that her heart was fine, but she was very tired and now she had to stay in bed. She didn't even understand what the doctor said. "Don't worry, I'll spend a week or 2 in bed and then I'll feel better," she tried to reassure her son. "Let me hire you a nurse, okay? She'll help you," Alex suggested. "Don't. There is no necessity. Gina will help me." The woman waved her hand, dismissing the idea. No matter how hard her son tried to persuade his mother to accept professional help, she categorically refused. After that incident, Alexander started visiting his mother, and every night he would bring her groceries and cook for her. And so he sat beside her, watching her favorite shows and silly soap operas that made her sleepy. The woman was not getting better. She was still bedridden and complaining about the cursed illness that twisted her. 2 weeks passed. Alex was exhausted from such a schedule, but he couldn't neglect his mother either. He felt guilty for her when he got to the apartment on Tuesday and looked in the fridge. He was surprised. "Mom, you have a good appetite," he praised, but then frowned as well. "Well, I brought so many groceries the day before I cooked so much, and here the shelves were already empty." The mother smiled at her son, adjusting the blanket in her lap. "Yes, Gina visited me today and we had lunch together." The man nodded in agreement. He had already forgotten about the scene until he left his mother's apartment. He was coming down the stairs. Gina was coming to see Alexander. The woman smiled. "Hi, Alex. Are you coming from your mother's apartment?" "Yes, Gina." He smiled at her happily. "That's nice. That's really good," Gina nodded. "I was busy all day. Today I went to visit my granddaughter, and I didn't even have time to see Agnes." Initially, Alexander did not pay attention to Gina's words. They exchanged a few phrases and left alone. When he left the building and went to his car, Alex thought about it. Mom said Gina was at her house all day, but Gina wasn't in town today. But where was the food his mother said was missing? Who ate all this food with her throughout the day? The situation seemed strange to him. There was no reason for his mother to lie. It didn't fit with what she'd said on Wednesday. Alex's frown and melancholy were noticed by Abigail. "Alex, what's wrong with you again? You look so pale and nervous," Abigail asked. Alex immediately told his colleague about what was going on in his life. Abigail chewed the tip of her pen, deep in thought. "What is your mother's diagnosis?" the journalist asked. "I have no idea," Alex admitted. In fact, his mother didn't tell him what her diagnosis was. All she said was that she couldn't walk. He was so busy working and taking care of her that he forgot to turn on his brain. "Look, why don't you put a camera in your mom's apartment? That way you'll know what's going on there and where the groceries are going. You know, maybe someone is hurting her and stealing food, and maybe even her neighbor, and she's afraid to tell the truth. Or she is embarrassed," suggested a colleague. At first, the idea of putting a hidden camera in his mother's kitchen seemed strange to the man who was not in a spy movie. However, when his mother's stories became more alarming, he decided to take a desperate step when he came to cooking dinner for his mother. The camera had already been purchased. The tiny camera easily fits on the shelf between the cereal bowls that were rarely used in cooking. The camera was connected to the journalist's laptop through a special application. When he opened the laptop the next day, it launched the app. The man was speechless at what he saw. The image was not very clear. What can you expect from an inexpensive model of a device? However, he saw his mother miraculously walking in the morning. She went to the refrigerator in a professional manner, examining its contents. Taking out the sandwich her son made, she then watered her favorite orchids. A little later, at lunchtime, a neighbor appeared in the video as well. They actually had lunch together, eating steaks cooked by Alex. Then they switched to tea and biscuits. The only thing was, Gina was not only aware of his shrewd mother's excellent health, she was also in agreement with it. The man was angry. "Don't be so hysterical. After all, she is your mother. She probably did what she did out of great love." Abigail tried to cool the man's temper when she learned what had happened. "What a great motherly love to deceive her son," Alex muttered indignantly. "I don't know. She didn't have any illness," the woman pointed out. Then Alex remembered the fact that his colleague had been raised by her grandparents, who were no longer alive. It didn't make him come to his senses one bit. However, on the same night, Alexander forced his mother to confess to everything. It turned out that there was no emergency. Everything had been invented by the mother herself to see her son around more often. No matter how angry Alex was, he did not break off his relationship with his mother. He remembered the look on Abigail's face when she told him she didn't have a mother. He also remembered that he himself had given his mother a lot of trouble when he was young. And how many lies did he tell when he was young and stupid? He couldn't deny it. Alexander then had a serious talk with his mother, strictly telling her to learn about the limits, to draw a line. "Mom, I will never forget you," he confessed honestly. "I love you and will be there for you, but not every day. You understand?" The woman stopped and nodded. Alexander hugged his mother comfortably, stroking her back. "I will visit you more often. There's nothing to cry about," he promised. "No more making up silly stories. I'm getting worried." Alex kept his promise, and so did his mother. Now Agnes didn't distract him with phone calls and spent more time with her friend. She found hobbies and activities she enjoyed. Her son visited her often and happily because he did so sincerely, not compulsively. And one day, he brought home a modest, smiling young woman with him. "Mother, this is Abigail," her son introduced her. "She is my girlfriend." "Nice to meet you. Alex has told me a lot about you." Abigail's eyes glinted mischievously at those words. "Only good things." The woman smiled quickly, inviting her guest into the kitchen, which smelled of fresh homemade cookies. The girl nodded discreetly, nudging her boyfriend in the side.